This meeting started. Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar titled Census 2020, Making 500,000 Jobs Count, hosted by Neil Kelly from the Chancellor's Office and Stephanie Kim from Community Connect Labs. My name is Liberty Van Atten and I'm the project specialist for the California Adult Education Program Technical Assistance Project. Before we begin today's webinar, I'm just going to go over some general housekeeping. So during the webinar, if you have general questions, you can enter them in the general chat pod. We can see that Karen has already begun this, and that's great. The presenters will answer these questions at their first opportunity. If at any time you need technical assistance, please put a note in the chat box. If you have logged in using your initials, consortium name, school site, or an acronym, please identify who you are and how many people you have with you in the chat pod so that we can get a more accurate count of attendees of today's webinar. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. The recording and the presentation slides will be available for download on the California Adult Education Program website. And as always, if there is a need for technical assistance or professional development, please contact TAP. Okay, so now I'm going to hand things over to Neil to get things started.
All right, thanks, Liberty. Welcome, everybody. I know we're starting promptly, but we do have a lot of information to share. And the objective today is to get you up to speed and hopefully convince a lot of you to join the current pilot that we're going to be running starting this month to get ready for this would be for the address listers, which is being recruited right now. And then this would get everybody ready for the enumerator push in the fall. We have Stephanie Kim from Community Connect Labs with us today. And if you thought there was going to be any resources involved, I mean, Community Connect Labs is really doing all the heavy lifting. And so all you have to do is maybe target the students and they can reach out to them and get them connected to those jobs. So it's really simple, and we're going to go over that today. But at the end of it, we'll have a survey that if you are interested, you can fill out, and that'll schedule you for some training to get you up to speed and start the pilot going. If this isn't the right time, maybe you can come back with us in the fall for the enumerator push. But this is a great opportunity for the adult schools. We know you guys most of you aren't in the employment business or the workforce business, but this is an easy way to get people $20, $25 an hour jobs. Even teachers might be interested at your school. So with that little plug, let's look at the agenda. So we're going to first talk about the Census 2020 and the importance of field staff recruitment, why we're doing this effort. And then we're going to review the field jobs, the requirements and application process. And then we'll go over the Community Connect Labs, their recruitment program, and the tools that they have to make it really easy to participate in this process. And then we'll go specific to adult schools and community colleges, how they can participate under CAPE for this effort. And we'll talk about next steps, which includes that survey if you're interested. So with that, let's see if there's, I don't think anybody has any questions. So if you didn't get the slides, they're in the bottom lower left-hand corner under resources, and you can just click on that and download the slides. Also, like I said, we'll be having signups for the pilot at the end. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie, and she's going to take us through the next few slides. Take it away, Stephanie.
Great, thanks so much, Neil. Thank you, and thanks everyone for tuning in to learn about the census. We are about a year out now. You might have been reading about it in the news. There's a big Supreme Court case that's out right now about the citizenship question that's being proposed for the
I think we lost you, Stephanie.
So, Community Connect Labs. Oh no, I'm sorry. Can you not hear me right now? Are you able to hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, people can hear me. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for confirming. So A little background about me and my organization. So, Community Connect Labs, we are a nonprofit technology and training provider based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we usually work with organizations to just help them better engage their communities, especially these traditionally disenfranchised communities, using a mobile messaging technology. And so we got involved with the census about 2 years ago at this point, and we've been thinking a lot about how the census impacts our communities that we're serving, and what we can do utilizing our technology solutions to help ensure a complete and accurate count. So, for those of you who might be less familiar about the census, the way that we usually describe its implications is it's money and power. When you're thinking about um, the communities that are being counted, what they receive from the census is federal funding for things like food subsidies, preschools, roads, parks, libraries, and the number of seats of representatives in the House, for instance. And these numbers are set for the next 10 years. It also impacts the way that district lines are drawn, the way that electoral college votes are distributed. So the implications of the census are huge, and an undercount will really create an impact for the next 10 years. That's 2.5 presidential elections. So we want to make sure that we get it done, um, you know, well in the one chance that we have in 2020 to get people counted. So this is a snapshot of how federal funds coming from the government impact California. So this was FY15. As you can see, most of the funding that comes in per year, $76 billion of it goes to health programs. A good chunk of it goes to programs impacting children. So you could think about the students that you're working with and how, the stakes are pretty high for them. If they are not counted, if they are in these particularly hard to count communities, then these are the services that are going to suffer. So this is another reason why we want to just make sure that there's a complete count in the census. But there are a lot of challenges for Census 2020, and the Government Accountability Office actually rated it as high risk for a number of reasons. This is going to be the first online census, so instead of people getting paper forms mailed to them, they're going to be receiving an invitation to go online. These census forms are going to be sent out only on paper in English and Spanish, and that will happen later on during the process. So thinking about language access, thinking about technology access for the people who might not be as technologically literate. There are huge implications there for an undercount. There were significant budget cuts for this census. So, there's about a 40% discrepancy in the budgets between this census and the last one. And because of that, they had to cancel 2 of the 3 field tests that they were scheduled to do. So they did manage to do a field test in Providence County, Rhode Island last summer. But they had to cancel the tests in Puerto Rico and also on tribal territories. So we're not working with a lot of knowledge of just what to expect for a census. And then obviously there's negative public opinion, just the current climate, the current mistrust of the government, the potential addition of the citizenship question. All of that has led to the Census Bureau themselves saying that for communities that are in the hardest to count categories, so we're thinking about older people, we're thinking about immigrants, low-income communities, limited English proficiency, the response rate for them could be as low as 60%. And that is a significant issue, and that number could even go lower after this summer. The census will be doing one more test where they're actually testing the citizenship question. They're sampling 500,000 households in the country. And then from there, they might say, okay, in the hardest to count communities, maybe like Central Valley, California, we're looking at even a lower response rate. So what happens when there's a low self-response rate? Well, so people receive their census forms and they don't respond. It's going to be enumerators who go and pick up the rest of the count. So based on that, the Census Bureau has estimated that they're planning on hiring 500,000 people nationally to work as census enumerators. This is the largest non-military mobilization of workers that we know of. And so in California, given that we have a large state and we have a historically undercounted state, and we're anticipating an undercount in the state again, Community Connect Labs is estimating that we need to hire 55,000 people across the state of California to work in office and field jobs in the next year. So this is a lot of jobs. The census especially needs local bilingual candidates. So again, if you're thinking about these communities that have chosen not to participate in the census or respond, And then someone's going to go and knock on their door. You would imagine that they would have a better yield if they reflect the community that they're counting and they speak a local language. So the census really needs people who could speak multiple languages, but they're already experiencing a lot of trouble recruiting people because our economy is so strong. We have a low unemployment rate. Um, Additional challenges include an online application and assessment. So historically, senior citizens, for instance, used to work a lot as enumerators in previous censuses. And in their tests, they found that a lot of them couldn't use the online application. So there is not only a more difficult application process for certain people, but it's a really long leaky pipeline. If you need to hire 55,000 people in the state of California, you need a really long runway. I'm going to talk about timeline in a few slides, but you'll see that they're hiring right now for a certain position called address listers, and then they're going to be hiring next year for enumerators. But again, they need to have people entering the applications now. So based on all of that, we're going to walk through the requirements of the job. I like how Neil called this adult ed style. So Neil, I'll turn it back to you to describe a bit about what the job entails.
Hey, great. Thank you, Stephanie. So here are some of the things. We've have a work group that looked at this, that worked with Stephanie, and we identified some of the field job requirements that were specific to adult ed. For example, along with the citizenship and 18 years old requirement, we talked to CASAS, and given the skill sets that we're seeing for the enumerators and address listers, we're looking at advanced ESL and ASE type students. So along with U.S. citizens and 18 years old, those ASE, advanced ESL students are the kind of ones we would be targeting for this effort. They have to have a social security number because that's, Stephanie will show you, they have to log in or enter that in the online application. Candidates also have to have a selective service number, and that's the military draft. So if you weren't aware of that, that's another thing they ask you for. There is no educational level requirement. Everybody thought it was going to be high school diploma. It's not. So they really have no educational requirements, but you'll see the skill sets. And we do have a group working on kind of a curriculum if you do want to do more than just self-service or make people aware and point them to the website. We are having a group look at curriculum that would skill up or do refreshers for people that were interested in applying for these jobs. We'll get to that in a little bit too. So you also have to have good speaking and listening skills, digital literacy skills, because you're going to be using the smart pads and online apps, as well as, like Stephanie said earlier, bilingual is not a mandatory requirement, but it helps. English proficiency because of the speaking, good speaking and listening skills, interpersonal skills, cultural competencies, problem-solving skills or abilities. So we're trying to design that curriculum, kind of like a customer service type curriculum that brings in those type of skills that, if you're working frontline customer service, you might have to have those skills too. And then we look at this as a stepping stone. This is like a temporary job, but once you finish the census job, you will have some skills that are transferable, and that will also benefit that student. Also, there's some physical requirements because you're going to be standing long periods of time. You might be walking neighborhoods, climbing up stairs, apartments, buildings, those kind of things. And also you have to be aware of and pay attention to the privacy of the person you're talking to and the confidentiality. So that would be a skill set that people would have to have good mastery over as well. So let's pause there to see if anybody has any questions about these requirements. If you have a question about the citizenship or the SSN or the selective service number, or even, kind of the skill set we're looking for. And, we are going to be looking at some refresher workshops and stuff like that could, in addition to pointing them to the online application. could help. And so we're targeting those advanced ESL, ASE students. So Jose asks, is this only for citizens? And Stephanie, right now they are only recruiting U.S. citizens, correct?
That's correct. That is a new requirement from 2010. 2010, they had it a little looser. We also saw in 2010, however, that once they're down to the wire and the census is happening, they're realizing that they are short on enumerators who speak a certain language. So maybe they really need people who speak Farsi. So then they'll issue a waiver and make an announcement saying, if you are a green card holder who can speak Farsi, then please apply and we can hire you. So we anticipate seeing those waivers being issued again. We just won't know until when the census is upon us. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is just build a pipeline of interested people anyway. And if for some reason they do not qualify, because of their citizenship issue, we're not going to ask them directly, and I'll show you a little bit about that later. But it gives us a means to reach out to them later when there are other opportunities that open up.
Great,
I can
thank you.
also.
I think we
Yeah,
haven't. We
go ahead.
I think we have another question coming in from Vanessa. Where can a male find their selective service number if it's been X number of years? So let's say they're 30-year-old, 35, 45-year-old male. Where would they find that?
So the census asked you for the selective service number on the online application form, and it gives you an option to click into the selective service website to search for your number. But I believe that site also requires some other additional information to be able to look your information up. When I submitted an application, I obviously did not get that request because I'm a female candidate, but they do put in some guidelines to help you find it. Yes, and that's what
Right,
Heather
and
just.
Heather,
Mhm.
yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions before I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie to move to the next slide? I don't think we have any additional questions.
Great. Let me just wrap up this slide with a few additional points. So about the language skills, the way that it works is that the census will run an algorithm. When it's time to enumerate a community in Los Angeles, they're going to look at what the language needs are in that community, and they're going to run a search for all the candidates in the database who have a zip code or their cross street is near that community because they want to send people locally, and then who speak XYZ languages. And then based on that, that's how people float to the top. They do not evaluate your bilingual proficiency, but if you do, everyone has to complete the application in English. You can complete the assessment in Spanish, but if you do that, you have to take an additional English proficiency test. As of right now, though, those are the two main languages where the application materials are available. So all of this said, what Neil has pointed out, these different job requirements, it uses a lot of great skills that are, quite coveted these days in the employment space because these folks are going out, they're doing problem solving, they're listening, they're developing empathy, they're building relationships. And so we just thought it's a really great, just skill development opportunity for people who might have these part-time flexible schedules and who could use the money. So as Neil mentioned, it pays quite well in California. It pays anywhere from $15 to $30 an hour. San Jose, California, $30 an hour. Alameda County, I believe, is 25. Fresno is 16. LA is 22. So not only is it a decently paying job, but they are looking for people with part-time flexible schedules. They want people to work evenings and weekends when people are home. And it's sort of like those other gig economy jobs where you put in the hours that you're available to work, and if there's a match, then your app flashes. So let me click onto the next slide here. This is what the online application looks like. So if you go to 2020census.gov/jobs, you could actually go in and submit an application yourself. And I recommend that you do that so that you kind of see and experience what your students would be seeing and experiencing. This is a centralized application portal. So for both address lister and enumerator jobs, you go through the same portal. You only need to apply once. And then during the recruitment periods, they're going to run a search and then pull your name. So since I already submitted my application, supposedly I'm going to receive a call from the Census Bureau in a few weeks to recruit me for an address lister position. And then regardless of whether I work as an address lister or not, at some point next year, I should get a call to recruit me for an enumerator position. Um, in the application, there are some options to indicate you're interested in a supervisory role, and in which case they would give you an additional supervisory assessment. But the first half of the application, it takes about 15 minutes if you have all your information, right? So it asks for your social security number, it asks for what languages you speak, what modes of transportation you have access to, what's your selective service number. At no point, though, does it ask for your work experience, your education level, no resume. They set the bar really low on that end because they really are desperate for applicants. And then after you finish that 15-minute application, then there's a 15-minute assessment. So you need to take it in one sitting and it's timed. And this is just information that they don't really tell you upfront about it. So this is where we sort of started thinking about what tools we could develop again to help people go through this process and make sure that the actual application is not a reason why people are not getting census jobs. So here's a timeline that shows when things are happening over this next year. Someone lost audio. Are others still able to hear me? Yes. Okay, great. So here's the recruitment timeline. As I mentioned, there are two main types of field jobs. So if in the state of California, that 55,000 people number, most of it will be for census takers or enumerators, but there is a small address listing operation that will take place this summer and early fall. An address listing takes place in areas where they've experienced either significant change, like population growth. Maybe there was a boom in the last 10 years, or they've experienced some significant natural disasters. So you can imagine that places that got hit by the wildfires over the past few years might have a higher address listing operation. So they're hiring people where they're going to be doing the address listing. We don't have an exact number from the Census Bureau. It's probably just going to be, a couple hundreds, few thousand at most. But again, the census is not releasing that information. But the application, the recruitment is happening right now for that. So we want to move quickly. People will be asked to submit their application this month and next. And then the census will be calling folks, letting them know that they're eligible for the job, walking them through the background check process in June or July. There's a paid training component. So it's less clear on address lister jobs what the training entails, but for enumerators, we know that it's, you do it online, you watch some videos. There's a few in-person components, but it's generally flexible. So again, people can do it on their own time. And then lastly, the work. They're going to be deployed between August and October of this year. For census takers, it's the same exact process, same application, very similar training, and the timeline is just a little more stretched out. So because of those more significant scale of the recruitment for enumerators, this is why, again, they're accepting applications now, but they're going to be doing most of the actual recruitment and hiring activities in the spring of next year. And again, to answer your question, Heather, they only submit one application through this site, and then they're being considered for both of these jobs. So, in terms of messaging it to people, we know that they might not be hiring a lot of folks, but if we get their application, and also another thing I hear often from folks I talk to about this is like, they need jobs now as opposed to a job in spring of 2020. Yes, we totally want people to get jobs now if they could, but this is a really good backup plan. Just take 30 minutes, submit your application, and then when the time comes and the opportunity comes up, you never know where you're going to be and if you still need that opportunity. Great. So are there any questions about the timeline and the process that I just described? And you know what? It might actually help to walk through what the process looks like here. So think about your questions, enter them into the chat bot. But there are 8 steps that we've identified in the application. So the way we put this together was we've been working with the Census Bureau actually, and we participated in their accelerator program, worked with the field operations leadership team, and we're able to map this out. So the first big barrier is just letting people know that this opportunity exists in the first place. And so that's where activities like this webinar can really help. People need to get through an online application. They need to get through an online assessment. And that's like the most immediate activities. The interview, from what we've learned from the census, is basically every candidate has to get a phone call and just verify that they're real, it's them, that they applied, that they could speak XYZ languages and they're available to work. So it's not one of those like really intense job interviews where they're saying like, tell me about a time when blah, blah, blah. It's just, short and simple verification interview, given that they have to do this for many candidates. So once you get past the interview, if everything else on your application checks out, then you are invited to complete the onboarding process. And so this onboarding process is sort of like a conditional employment situation. You have to fill out some forms and you have to do a background check. So this is a third-party entity that is doing fingerprints and running a background check. And some of you who were following the 2010 census recruitment might remember there was a big lawsuit from there where they were saying that certain populations were prematurely excluded from working as enumerators because of a very stringent background check requirement. And given that the census really knows that they're going to need a lot of people to work this time, they've added additional structures in the process to make sure that anyone who might be precluded from working, the census will work with them to get to the bottom of it. So the issue there is that once background checks happen and a red flag is raised, while people are given a chance to resolve the situation, the communication happens over snail mail. So you got to get people to be checking their mailboxes for that. Once people get through the background check, they have 60 days to resolve any issues. Then it's the paid training, and then it's work. And then from there, people who work as census enumerators, they're exempt from or what I'm so if you're already receiving Social Security benefits, if you're receiving other types of low-income benefits, they are not impacted negatively by the fact of you working as a census enumerator. So hopefully that's clear. You could ask about it again if it's not clear. But there are processes that need to be, there are steps that need to be taken in order for people to claim, worker displacement benefits and all of that. So we put post-job as an important step in the whole application process. So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat box right now. Any questions people have about the application process, the requirements? Pretty straightforward, right? Oh, Raji, you have a question? Let me pause a second to wait for those questions to come in. Oh, okay.
I think Stephanie is typing in a question, so we can pause for a second.
Okay, great.
So, Stephanie, I'll ask you a question. So, the people on the line, if they don't have enough staff to really get into this, they can still participate by just working with your organization to target students that we think are desirable, and then the students can just take it from there, right? If they're thinking of just kind of a minimal amount of outreach, which is fine, they don't have to do too much heavy lifting to ones that might be, doing refreshers. So there's a wide range of participation levels for this Census 2020 effort, correct?
Yes, and that's what I'll be getting into in these next slides. As you all just saw and learned, it took me 25 minutes to talk to this group about the entire process. It's a lot of information, right, about why the census is important, what the role of enumerators are, who qualifies, what the process is. And this information is just, frankly, not very clear from the Census Bureau. And it's ultimately the Census Bureau's job to recruit these folks, but they are having issues because they do not have the same types of local networks as groups like yours do. And so we've received funding to support local groups who are most in contact with likely candidates who could do a good job and to really help bring in that complete count and to support these organizations as much as possible in getting this information out, because I don't expect all of you to know this process as well as I do. So our goal in creating this program was to automate this and sort of create a virtual coach or assistant that helps people through the application process so that you all don't. So let me get into that in a second, but Stephanie, to your question, after submitting an application, how long before someone reaches out? So let me go back to my timeline slide here. So you could submit your application again now. And again, it's a single entry point. So you go in as an address lister, that's what you'll be considered for first. And then afterwards, you're considered as for a census taker or enumerator. This is when we think the Census Bureau will be reaching out in the interviews, onboarding forms, and background checks line here. So June, July of this summer. And then for enumerator jobs, February and March of next year. So you can imagine for enumerators, especially, say someone submits their application right now, like I submitted my application last September, actually, right when it opened. I might forget about the opportunity, or, who knows what my life will look like next year. Well, me personally, I'm still working on the census, but, for other people, they just don't know. And so thinking about how we could engage them and, retain them as candidates through this process was something else that we've been really thinking about. So this is what my organization ended up developing after studying and learning about the recruitment process. We also put the job application in front of students. We put it in front of other communities that we think would be great candidates, and we also put them in front of staff and teachers that we know are serving these candidates. And we got a lot of feedback about just what's unclear to them, where they want support, and how we could both be helpful. And so then we developed this tool. As you can see on the left side of the screen, it is just a text messaging tool. So it's not an app. It's designed to be available in both English and Spanish. And you just text into it and talk to it in the way that you're talking to like a friend or a family member. And the goal of this is, again, if we get people to text into it, it could take care of the whole process of building and supporting that pipeline of candidates. So it's letting people know about the opportunity, it's directing them to the application, it's telling them about the application steps. Like we have videos, we have checklists for them. For candidates who do not have access to a computer, it directs them to local resources for application support. And then it sends little reminders. Like once we know the census is starting to do interviews, for instance, they're notifying people via email that they're interviewing them. So we send them a little text saying, hey, just to let you know, the census has started calling people for interviews. Have you heard from them? And then lastly, we're getting really good data that's self-reported from these users on just who is texting in. If we know, for instance, in the Central Valley, we need candidates who will speak XYZ languages. From this, since we ask everyone their location and their language, we are able to inform outreach efforts and adjust as necessary. But this whole tool is anonymous. At no point are you giving your name. And so, everyone is just using their phone number to text in. And the questions that we ask are screening questions that we've phrased very intentionally to make sure that they're not divulging potentially secure information. So for instance, we do screen for their eligibility to see if they're a US citizen 18 years or older, but we frame it as a compound question so that if they answer no, then we don't know why. So this is how the tool works. And my organization has received funding to make it available to the entire CAPE network. And so the way that you all could get involved, it's two simple ways. The first is around outreach. So we would provide you with a flyer, some sample marketing collateral. We would provide you with some additional training. It's just a 1-hour webinar that I would provide later this month for staff who are going to be interfacing with potential students who are interested in applying. And then all you got to do is just get those flyers out there and just get your staff to know to talk to people about this opportunity. We also have a way of reaching students by using contact lists. So if you already have a means of reaching out to students using text messages, we could send an outbound message to all of them or an email saying, hey, just to let you know, this is an opportunity that's available to you. Text jobs to this phone number to receive some tips about it. So that is like the basic level of involvement that we're asking for participants from you all. If you are really galvanized about this and excited and activated, there are a lot of things you could do to support the candidates. So you could proactively host info sessions and workshops about these jobs. And again, the call to action doesn't have to be, just apply to the job. The call to action could be text into this phone number and you'll receive some tips and updates about the job. But we are very clear in our texting that, we're directing people to the Census website. So whether or not they text with us, they're still being directed to the Census website. For your campuses, if you have a large computer lab for applicants who might not have their own personal computers, then you could make those labs available for them, and then maybe even have a staff who's hanging around during certain times to support applications. Neil mentioned that there's a curriculum that's being put together for refresher trainings and workshops just to prep these applicants to do a great job when they're out in the field and to be able to build upon this experience in their careers later on. And then lastly, we would love to support tracking and to include this participation for the students in their records. And so Neil could talk about later examining how to enroll these students in these different programs to update their progress. So this is an example of the collateral we would provide to you in this toolkit. So again, for those of you who are interested, you would sign up via a link to a survey form that is in the PowerPoint deck. And then we were going to have one-hour training for your staff sometime later this month. Your campus will receive a personalized flyer with a specific word. This word is associated with your campus. So this is how we know someone is referred from you. And then we're giving you a specific phone number. We have one phone number that's an English line and one phone number that's a Spanish line. And then from there, our tool takes over the rest. So literally nothing else you have to do. And if you are going above and beyond and doing some additional outreach, we're giving sample newsletter blurbs, social media blurbs. These are just examples from a partner that we're working with in San Jose. So let me go to the next step slide for Neil to wrap up on next steps. But in the meantime, people, please continue asking these great questions, chat them into the chat box.
Right. Thanks, Stephanie. So just on the TOPS Pro, so the people that are working on the curriculum, they are looking at maybe designing an IET program or something like that that can expand these refresher and workshop trainings to the classroom and extend it past the 12-hour mark and qualify possibly as IET, and that's in the works. So if you're really looking at that's something that will be available probably over the summer. This is a great opportunity. Since they're already in your system, this could qualify as a service. If they do get the job, you could count that as an employment outcome. So there's a lot of things that can benefit the student as well as the school that's collecting the data. Plus, it's increasing their skill set. So like Stephanie said, you really, at a minimum, you don't really have to do anything except just identify those students that are advanced ESL or ASC that you think might be interested. You don't even have to screen them for citizenship or social security numbers. They can self-screen, based on the questions that Stephanie's organizations ask. So we're getting a big helping hand here, and so I just want to encourage you to think about this. And we do have. Let me move to the next slide. We do have four schools already. ABC Adult School down in Los Angeles County has signed up. Visalia Adult School in the Valley, as well as the Gateway Consortium, which is Merced, and then Ventura Adult School on the coast. So we're hoping to get a few more pilot sites to sign up this month to go through the process. Like Stephanie said, we're going to start with address listers, which will also qualify those people for the enumerator jobs. So if you are interested, this is what you're going to do. You click on this survey, and if you have trouble, from your slides or whatever, TAP can send you this survey form directly to you via email. And then that gets you in the loop for the 1-hour training that will be scheduled later this month. And we're also going to be doing a similar type workshop, but with a panel. And so some of the participants, and we'll also be covering census awareness, part of the COAP that CASAS and the field have developed and sent to CDE for EL Civics approval. We'll also have some panel members related to that as well. But we'll be talking about kind of update on the pilot, how it's going, some interesting stuff we're finding out. And so we'll do an update on June 12th at 10:30 at the Casa Summer Institute. So for today, if you are interested or you need more information, feel free to follow up with Tab, but we would encourage you, if this is something that you are interested, to fill out the survey and we can schedule you for the training. And we just think this is a good opportunity. Stephanie's organization brings a lot of resources that the adult schools and the community colleges don't have right now for this effort. And so it's just a good benefit for the student, and it will pay dividends off for the state as far as the census count and the funding that goes along with it. Stephanie, anything else to add on that?
No, I think you summed it up nicely. So the PDF presentation file that's on the bottom left of your screen, that contains the live link where you could click on it and fill it out. It's just going to ask for a single point of contact that we could communicate with, the name of your adult school. Please write out the full name since there's a lot of you and I want to make sure I have the right organization. Neil and I were chatting about how we could move this forward as quickly as possible. I know a few of you want to get your whole consortium involved, and we could talk about doing that for enumerators later this fall. But since time is of the essence for address listers, we want to get candidates in the pipeline now. It's totally fine if you just sign up as your individual school, and we could have a conversation later about how to expand this in your network. Per Sherry's question, yes, career centers are great resources and partners for this. So, you could list the career center as the participant. We'll invite them to the webinar. We'll train the staff on what they need to know about census jobs so that they are just not, drawing a blank if someone asks them. But again, the tool takes care of the rest. And then per Vanessa's question, so Stephanie addressed number 8 in the application process. So number 8 in the application process was what happens after the census job. So that's really an exciting thing that we could all figure out together here. Our tool, we want to make sure, since we have this captive audience really of people communicating with us, trusting us to learn about census jobs and getting that update, we are definitely for sure going to be sending them after the jobs are done, like information about worker dislocation benefits and other things that we know are available to everyone. But if your school is doing a workshop on how to put census jobs on your resume, or how to talk about your census job in an interview, or maybe you're hosting a job fair for people who just completed census jobs, and you have local employers who are really interested in people who have that fresh customer service skills experience in the field. Because we know who texted in from which school and which school they're associated with, we could send personalized invites out saying, hey, it looks like you're in the area. Would you be interested in this workshop that we're having in the future? So this whole idea of just serving as that communication scaffolding throughout this entire life cycle of the enumerator recruitment process. We're hoping to also make sure that we're carrying it through the end so people have closure, so to speak. Since after they work for the census is not really going to have any off-ramp type opportunities for them.
Right. Stephanie, I'm going to add one more thing, but then I have a question for you. So this is a good opportunity for the adult schools as well, because in the census effort, you're going to be probably working with the same community organizations that you might end up working when we release the AB 2098 immigrant integration effort. And so CBOs play a big role in immigrant integration. They're playing a big role in Census 2020. So this is another, pro to participating in the pilot, because you get to know community networks and community organizations. My question to Stephanie would be, how does our efforts kind of parallel to the census committees? Are you seeing, I think we're a little bit out in front of the census committees, but at what point do we maybe on our parallel track connect with those committees, and how do you see those committees working with the adult schools as we engage in this effort that you were discussing today?
It's a great question, Neil. So the committees that Neil's referring to are these local complete count committees. In your county or in your region, you probably have one. California is quite active on that front. But Neil, like you said, they are moving a little slowly because just the sheer size of these groups, right? Some of these committees have, over 100 organizations involved, and it's, community organizing. So we've designed this program so that it works in parallel to what these committees are planning, but it does not. It should not conflict with whatever they're messaging out at any point. And in fact, if the Census Bureau has reached out to you and your campus about census jobs, because I do know that they have been reaching out to some folks, this is not like a one or the other situation. It's a yes and situation. We're just trying to get people to the census job site. So if the census asks you at some point, hey, can you host a career fair for census jobs and like feature us there, you can say yes to that. You can also advertise at the career fair this texting program. The value that this texting program brings is the follow-ups and the reminders and the nudges and the resources that the census is not providing. So you could definitely advertise both. And as your local complete count committee starts putting together programming around enumerator recruitment, again, this is not going to conflict with any of that. We've designed the network or the pilot that we're rolling out here, though, is contained within the adult ed network for now. So, we're referring people to school specific resources. We're sending them school specific information. So for that reason, we are, hoping to keep this within this network here. And then if larger communities, if you're hearing that, your county or your city or another nonprofit wants to use it, I'm happy to have a separate conversation with them to see how we could create a separate account for them. But this particular adult ed outreach program is funded by a grant that we've received. We are rolling this tool out in other areas, actually through contracts with the local governments.
I think Dana has a question about timing. Do you want to answer that one,
Sure.
Stephanie?
Most of the pilot end this month. Yes, so the pilot will continue into the fall for your group, because if people are texting in now, obviously we want to let them know when things are happening for enumerator recruitment next spring. So we're planning on having your account open through August 2020, through the end of the census life cycle. So if the programs
Right.
end this month, I would definitely push to do outreach on address lister opportunities. Sit in. I could even, if people sign up quickly enough, I could even potentially schedule a training for sooner. We could have the flyers created for you, and you could, send out your little outreach emails, post them on social media, whatever you could do to get the word out before the schools, the programs wrap up. But the texting will definitely be continuing to work even if your schools are not in session.
Yeah, so Dana, what you could do is identify those advanced DSL or those ASC students in your program, get a list of the phone numbers, and if you're comfortable, hand that over to Community Connect Labs, and then they do all the work over the summer while the schools close of keeping these students in the loop on what's happening with the census and how to apply and those kind of things. So it could be as simple as that while your school's closed, your students are getting information about job opportunities. So think about that. Maybe that could be a different approach if you want to do that. Stephanie, any comments on that?
Yeah, I forgot to talk about that. So thanks for bringing that up, Neil. So, passively, we could just receive inbound text. Someone sees on their job board this opportunity, they text in, and then the first message is always permission to text them. So, they text in, it's like, hi, it's such and such adult school, or hi, it's Census Outreach. Do you want to learn more? So then they say yes, and that's them opting in. The work that we've done actually historically, so we work with the United Ways, for instance, and we just did a big outreach for earned income tax credit. And for that, because they already have an existing texting relationship with their clients, we sent an outbound message to everyone saying, hey, it's the United Way. Do you want to learn about earned income tax credit? So in the same way, this is something we could definitely do with your program. If you have a list of contact numbers, it's actually a really good way to get people engaged. And then the first question is always, would you like to receive more information? If they say no, then we remove them from the list. And all of this information, again, you would just provide phone numbers. There are no names attached to them. we would upload them into our secure server, and those phone numbers are not being used for anything else. They are your phone numbers. So if you have further questions about that, you could reach out and ask me. But I will be covering what that looks like if you want to do that in the training we do later this month.
Okay, we have a couple of people typing, so I'm assuming there's follow-up questions to what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
So think about that. I mean, like we said, there's a kind of a minimalist approach, and then there's all-in approach, and you don't have to do the all-in. You could just do the minimal approach. Okay. Right. I think did Jody have a question? Dana says realistically not this month, so it's a little tough for their school, but I think Jody had a follow-up question.
And what we're hoping, the reason why we're calling this a pilot is because we're looking to learn. This is obviously our first census where we've developed digital tools because the last census was just a totally different ballgame. And so we want to see what works for address lister recruitment, what doesn't work. And then in August, when that recruitment wraps up and we get some good feedback on, did this program bear fruit? How did it work for you all? Then we could make some changes and then really think about how we could scale it for enumerator recruitment, which is the large push in the fall.
Right, and even if your school has, let's say you have one class of ASC, or you have 20 students in your ESL advanced, that's okay. I mean, just to target those students and get the word out to them, you might be in a rural area or a hard-to-count area, and that would be important if some of those people are interested in those jobs. I think Jody did submit her question.
Yes, I see the question. So yes, you need student permission, but we also ask permission when we message them. So a couple of ways you could collect contact information. You could even, have all your teachers announce at the end of their classes, do you want to receive information, put in your phone number here and we'll, upload that. You could send out an email with the flyer and just encourage people to text in that way. But we're only collecting phone numbers, so no names. And then again, it follows the texting guidelines according to federal law, and that we ask them for permission to communicate with them. So it's not like those random texts you get during campaigns where you're like, how did you get my number? Why are you messaging me? Please stop. Those numbers are purchased from voter databases. We are only going through the networks that currently exist. So if you're not comfortable sharing your phone numbers, we could definitely work around that and just focus on making sure that your outreach game is really strong. But for those of you who are able to share phone numbers, it's really easy for us to input it and then just send those messages out.
Okay, so let's ask a question. Do you think this confidentiality issue is a big issue at the adult school, or let's hear from the people that are still on the line. What would be an issue that would prevent you from participating?
And I think we could approach this in multiple ways. What we found at the end of our texting campaigns is that some organizations have been like, oh, I really like, and our students really like how we're communicating with them via text. What else can we use this for? But for others who, we're done doing census recruitment and you don't plan on texting anymore, we'll delete all of their information from our database. We actually did this for our earlier census project last year when we were collecting address files. We wiped our servers once the information went to where it needed to go.
Okay, so got a couple of responses. So if you are interested, so it seems like Heather might be interested, don't forget to fill out the survey so Stephanie can schedule you to get something, and she can do this very quickly like she said. So if you're, like Dana said, you're school is closing, at the end of the month or early June, we can work to get that information, get this thing rolling for you.
Yeah, I agree, Jody. Timing is a challenge. What's also a challenge that we've learned from our other texting campaigns is that, um, you know, people, even if they're hearing from an organization that they know and trust, they sometimes get a little shocked when it's like, oh, you started texting now. And so what we found as a best practice is for organizations that are planning to do outbound text to actually let people know that they're going to receive a text message, and that makes them more likely to respond. So if you are going to be one of the organizations who provide a list of phone numbers and then you're sending a message out through our platform, then you send an email out maybe for you send it out a week before and then a few days before, just saying, FYI, you're going to receive a message and it's from us. And the only way for you to continue receiving messages is if you respond and say yes. If you don't want to receive messages, say no, and then it'll stop.
Right. And just to wrap up, so we do have, schools that are participating in the pilot, and like Stephanie said, we'll run through the pilot for the address listers. They'll get signed up for both address listers and enumerators. We'll do some lessons learned probably between now and the end of summer. Then we'll probably come back to you. Maybe we'll do a fall kind of blitz on the enumerators, and we'll probably do a workshop at the Cape Summit at the end of October, and we'll try to get more adult schools interested then. But from this pilot that we're doing now, we'll learn probably a lot of good things about how adult schools are approaching this. What's the response from the students? We'll get a lot of feedback. And so by the fall, if you're kind of sitting on the fence or can't do it now, you can come back and we'll have even a better, if it sounds good now, it'll be even better in the fall for the big enumerator push. Stephanie, anything to add to close today?
So I gotta say that this is a really enthusiastic go-getter group. We already have 4 schools that have submitted their response, or 9 schools, I'm sorry, 9 schools that have submitted their response to participate. So thank you for doing that so quickly. What I might do is actually just go ahead and reach out and start scheduling this train. 10 responses. Wow, you all are this is a great group. Yeah, I'm very cognizant of time. So let's see if we could schedule something sooner. The people that I would want in the room for the training is their frontline staff. So if you have a marketing person who's in charge of your newsletters or social media, if you have the person who's running your computer lab, if you have someone who is managing the career center or start working as a career coach, those are the people that I want to train for you so that you don't have to train them yourself. Anthony, yes, now there are 11 responses. I'm so excited. They're quite all over the place too. Great. And as you could see in the form, you could choose the level of involvement that you have. There are little options that you could check off, and then we'll make sure that's all sorted when we set up the tool for you. So great. Thank you so much again for your time and your willingness to try this out with us.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing how the pilots go, and we'll do some touch points like at CASAS. We'll have a workshop kind of updating how we're doing. We might do a kind of a check-in in September via webinar, and then at the end of October, we'll do another workshop on this at the summit that we have every year. So looking forward to working with all of you. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for being on the webinar today and your organization helping us. And thank you, Liberty and Marjorie, for your technical support today. And Stephanie, any last words before we turn it over to Liberty?
No, I will be at the summit in June, so hopefully we'll meet some of you in person as well.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, Neil and Stephanie, and our audience for participating in today's very, very informative webinar. As a reminder, the recording of this webinar will be available online on the California Adult Education website. After the webinar ends, an evaluation link will open on the screen. We really want to encourage you to complete the evaluation as it supports our efforts of continuous improvement. And I just want to remind you that if there is a need for technical assistance or professional development, please contact TAP. Thank you.